that pillow for me, dude. What's it feel like? You describe, my buddy Shoes here, you describe what you're feeling from our sponsor this season. No pressure, man. They are paying for this, though, just as a reminder. Talk on the mic.
I think I like the blanket a lot.
There you go. And that's exactly how they wanted us to say it. People think they like it a lot.
Yeah, and the pillows are comfortable.
If only the mic stand and the microphone were brought to you by Barefoot Dreams, maybe that'd be comfier for you to get the mic where you want it, because you seem like it's a little tight, you know? Versus the way, there you go, versus the smoothness of the Cozy Chic fabric on the Barefoot Dreams products. Now, I do want to mention, you guys, this episode, as you could tell by how good this is going, is brought to you by Barefoot Dreams. They make some of the coziest products around. Cozy Chic fabric is actually the name of this. Does it feel cozy chic to you?
Do you know what? It does feel quite nice.
Chic is an English word, isn't it?
Nah, a sheik is like some kind of religious overlord, isn't it?
Okay, no, I don't think they mean that. This is like chic, like stylish. I think they meant.
But if they wore one of these on their heads,
maybe
it would be a very chic.
That would be a cozy chic. And if you want to be a cozy chic, you can actually go to barefootdreams.com, put the promo code in, PAPA15, for 15% off your first purchase. I'm super grateful they're a part of this season. I'm really glad Shu is here for the open of this episode, because what we didn't know, we forgot to tell our guest today, but our guest coming in was a very famous weatherman, and Shu's childhood dream was to be a weatherman. So it's kind of fitting that you're here on the couch after the weatherman was.
I did want to be a weatherman, yeah.
What would you do if you were the weatherman? Like, how would you sound?
I would mostly talk about the weather.
And soccer.
Yeah, and soccer, which is played outside.
You'd be like, you better know what the weather is because my team's playing.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
I just want to say, man, I'm really glad you joined the Open, because Barefoot Dreams, I'm going to send this to them. They're going to be really happy that I have a new spokesperson in the Open of the episode.
We love comfort.
Just what their tagline is. Again, barefootdreams.com. Let's get into it.
I think people just want to be taken out of their heads for an hour and a half. Just here's what you and I have in common. I'll make jokes about it. You have the same feelings I do. I've just put a punchline at the end.
Yeah.
And you make them feel better. And I just think what we do is so necessary right now.
Yes, hello, welcome back to the Pop-Up with Paul and Friends. Guys, thanks for coming back. However you got here to see this, to hear this, we appreciate you. Make sure you subscribe. Make sure you do everything you can. Leave a review, why not? And, you know, when I do this show, I get to meet very cool people with my jobs. This next guest is one of the coolest guys I ever got to meet with my day job on TV. This guy, I think, has been on TV more than anybody I've ever met in L.A. He looks real good on camera. Comedian, weatherman, all things in between. Put your hands together for Fritz Coleman, everybody. We want you to pump yourself up. That's how we start the show.
God bless you, man. I've never gotten, even in clubs, I haven't gotten a response like that. How are you, my friend? I'm glad to see you're doing this. You're such a skilled interviewer, and you have such a great personality on television. I'm not surprised you've branched out and brought this into your fold.
Thank you for saying that, man. It means a lot coming from you, from someone who spent decades on TV. Yeah. I love the story of your career, because I think it's kind of why we, like, what happened for you is kind of the dream. Like, when I hear about how you got your successes, it feels like a dream come true. I'm curious if it happened that way for you.
I've had an astonishing amount of good luck. The way I was discovered to be a weatherman, I didn't want to be a weatherman. I didn't know anything about meteorology. I flunked math and science in high school. But I was working at the Comedy Store, 1982, and my friend, who worked at NBC, was an anchor at the time, brought his boss, who was the news director, and his boss's wife down to see me do a show at the store one Friday night. And I talked on stage about having done, I worked for Armed Forces Radio and Television in the Navy, and they forced me to do the weather against my will. I didn't know anything about weather. They didn't care. It was just all about presentation. So I told a couple of anecdotes about that on stage, and after the show was over, I went back to meet this news director, and he said, "This is a very odd question. Do you have any desire to come to Channel 4 and do some vacation relief weather forecasting for me? I have a Maine weather guy who hasn't had a vacation in a year. I need some help on weekends. Would that interest you?"
Yeah.
And I was making $25 a show at the Comedy Store. I almost passed out. I said, "Oh, my God. when do you want me to start? And can I carry your wife to the car for you or anything? He said, well, you have to audition. So, and I said, full disclosure, you heard me say on stage, I don't know anything about weather. He said, perfect. There's no weather in California. This will work out great. So I auditioned for that gig the next Thursday. I got the job as the fill-in guy. I did that for 2 years. And then I was bumped up to the main weekday weather person. And I retired 2 weeks shy of my 40th anniversary.
That's unbelievable.
I've eaten up all my good luck in my life.
Wow.
Seriously.
I want to go back to the Comedy Store because when you're working out in the 80s and there's a lot of really great comedians at that time there, do you know people did you know the producer was going to see you that night?
No, I knew he was coming to the show because they were my guests. But I knew it had nothing to do with employment. He was just a friend of my friend.
So you just thought
and he was coming to see the show.
Yeah,
coming to see my stupid 15 minutes on Friday night in the original one. And it just turned out to be serendipitous.
I asked that though too because for me and with stand up, I feel like a lot of the time you want to do your best and impress people that, like, if you think you're going to get a job out of it, say agents are coming or someone from the
I'm really bad at that.
So am I.
I'm bad at the audition process.
Yeah, it's terrible.
I auditioned for the Letterman show. I auditioned for Carson. I ended up getting Carson because they thought the weatherman comedian thing was a good hook.
Yeah.
And it was. But when I knew the Letterman people were in the audience or like the Merv Griffin show, I'm a terrible auditioner because I'm totally preoccupied.
How long were you doing stand up when this kind of lightning in a bottle moment happened?
About 6 years.
Okay, so you were seasoned.
I came out here. I was a DJ for 15 years. And when you were a DJ in the 80s, you would get a job hosting at clubs. You spinning records. And I had a job as the MC at a jazz room. And if you know anything about jazz players start the show when they want to. Well, the club owner says and advertises the show to start at 8 o'clock. But the jazz guys might not be ready. They're back in the van doing whatever they're doing. And purely as a defense mechanism, I began to write material for myself because the show starts at 8. If the band doesn't start till 8:20, I have nothing to talk about.
Yeah.
I can read the upcoming acts. I can say, so how's it going? What about this weather, And that's how I built a show for myself. And then I came out here in 1980 woefully underprepared. I had maybe 10, 12 minutes on stage. And I came out here. I'd never been to L.A. before. I slept on a woman's floor in an apartment, this woman I met doing commercials. And I went down to the Comedy Store the first night I went there because in those days, that's where you had to go. Letterman and Leno and all these people were talking about the Comedy Store. So I went to the Comedy Store. On stage that night was Gary Shandling preparing for his first Tonight Show, Billy Crystal doing the whole Muhammad Ali impersonation, J.J. Walker, Jimmy Walker, and the closer was somebody you might have worked with, Charles Fleischer. Do you know Charles?
No.
Oh, he's not of this planet brilliant.
Wow.
He was the voice of Roger Rabbit in the movie.
Oh, yes.
And brilliant. And all those guys. I was so deflated by the end of this, and I said, "What? I have 10 marginal minutes of comedy. What made me think I should move to L.A. and pursue a career?" And I went out the door with my tail between my legs. And I said, "Well, I'll just stay here till my money runs out."
Right.
Then I got a job doing voiceovers at a radio station. I was able to make a living and continue doing open mics for a couple of years, and finally made it.
Now, the store back then, I'm so curious about because I kind of romanticize not just the comedy scene, in general, decades of time in show business, old restaurants. The store, though, at that time, because the 70s was the Letterman, late 70s, right?
Yes.
It was Letterman. So, but then those guys all got famous from there. So was it saturated with people thinking they were the next Lenos and Lettermans, or what was it like?
Just starting the comedy wave, where every town in America had a comedy club.
Yeah.
There were more comedy clubs than Starbucks around the United States. Just starting. But there was another thing that sort of dampened the business, and that was the strike. I don't know if you heard about the strike.
Yes, of course, yeah.
Where Steve Lebetkin jumped off the top of the high. It was really bad. And it was a strike because for all that time up until that point, the 10 years before that, all the club owners had not been paying the comics in L.A. because they thought, no, this is comedy college. It's a privilege for you to perform on my stage with my mic because you might get discovered with show business, which is BS.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? In what other in what other town in America, what other business would you not pay your performers?
Yeah.
And they're becoming millionaires, and you're not paying 10 comics to perform.
Crazy. And bring people sometimes too.
Right.
Yeah, sell tickets.
Yes.
It's crazy.
And so they were forced to start to pay, but the relationship between the club owners and the comics was really dicey through about 1981 and 82. So it was good because those guys were making it famous. Every time they went on the Tonight Show, I'm at the Comedy Store.
Right.
That gave it the buzz. But there was also this thing that softened it up a little bit.
It's so funny, the comedy business, because it's really not that different. Like, still today, it's the last part of show business, and I love it. I love being on stage, but it's the last part where you're like kind of compensated for the work you do, and that, like, if you know the TV business like you do, and you got a full-time job from comedy, which you probably felt the difference. It's still sort of like hard to make a living.
Impossible
to make money. It
You
takes
will never
some
make
time.
a living in this town. You'll make $35 a set.
Right.
You'll maybe get a free drink. You will never.
It's the road, right?
Yeah. And the reason why it was very easy for me to accept this job is that I was a middle act. I was a feature. You know, when you go on the road, it's the opener, which is usually a local kid that MCs the show and does 15 minutes. And then you have a feature, the 20 minutes, and then the headliner. Usually the headliner is a guy who has a little bit of a national rep, you know, has done TV shows, and he either four walls the room or has, you know, that kind of thing. I was a middle act. I was making $500 or $600 to do 6 nights and often pay for my own transportation.
Right.
So even outside LA, it was impossible to make a living.
Yeah.
And I had 2 kids. So it was very easy for me to say yes to the weather job because it gave a stable life to my children.
Yeah, and also I love the story of yours too, because it's a natural progression with your personality as a comedian, a fun guy, to do weather. You established that personality for weather here in LA. I mean, before you, it was kind of maybe a more serious.
Well,
anchor,
they had Pat
right?
Sajak, who was he was 2 weathermen before me.
Okay.
At NBC, but he was very dry.
Right.
And he wasn't trying to call attention to his humor like I was. If I couldn't get a joke off, I was wasting my day. You know?
Right.
But he was very sly about it, and he was very funny. But you're right. I mean, there were some oddball weathermen around the United States that were trying to be kitschy. But the thing about it is, you can't be too wacky, because people get tired of that.
Yeah.
Because when you're coming into somebody's living room for 40 years at exactly the same time every day, 5:18, you don't want them saying, "Oh my God, not this again." You know.
Yeah.
So you have to kind of warm up to them a little bit.
Did you meet any resistance with getting that job and thinking like a comedian early on?
Yes.
What was that like?
Well, this news director, Steve Antonetti, God rest his soul, had to go to bat for me and put his job on the line. He went to the head of the stations division, a guy by the name of Al Jerome, who is the head of all the NBC stations. And he said, "Hey, here's a great idea. I want to hire a weather guy who's had no real experience in weather, but he's a comic." and Al Jerome said, "Listen, if you want to try that, you have my support."
Wow.
And if he hadn't, and it was never done before, but that was back in the day. It's so, and you and I talk about how things have changed.
Yeah.
It's so different now.
Yeah.
Because each television station was able to sort of brand themselves how they wanted to.
Right.
And we had a sports guy, Fred Rogan, and they spent millions of dollars promoting us, because we both did kind of humor. He was the funny aspect of sports. And they built us up in this town and gave us a career.
Yeah.
They don't do that anymore. Now it's so branded. All the NBC stations just want LA to look like New York, want them to look like Chicago.
Right.
It's about everybody looking the same, so when you tune in, you know where you are.
That's why I relate so much to these stories and Carson and how TV once was. And I worry because the creativity, like, there's no Seinfeld sitcom if it was a surefire, like, the entertainment business wants surefire money successes for almost everything.
That was
now.
not surefire by any stretch of the
No, but
imagination.
most successful. It's so funny. It's like that trope of like executives are like, that will never work, and then it's the biggest show ever, and they go, "Oh, I greenlit that."
Yeah.
But that's sort of funny how like I worry about the wiggle room in between, because that's where stars are made. That's where franchises are made.
Yeah.
You
That's
were
a
able
great point.
You were able to thrive at a time when it was a little bit looser.
And they took a chance. Exactly. Exactly.
But I guess I'm saying it for my generation. It's like, what? Take chances on us. Like, why aren't?
No, I 1,000%
Why
agree
isn't
with
it?
you.
Why is it so much harder?
I guess because there's so much money involved, and it's so competitive. When I started, there were 3 televisions: ABC, CBS, and NBC. Now there are like 9 stations.
Yeah.
Many of them are 24-hour news.
Yeah.
So the competition has increased
It's
exponentially.
more saturated.
But it's really interesting you mentioned that about Seinfeld. At first, Brandon Tartikoff rejected the show. He said it's too Jewish. Nobody's going to.
Wow.
And he's Jewish.
Yeah.
It's just not. It's too, in the weeds with that. But they gave it a chance to grow for a couple of years.
Right.
And there was another guy, Grant Tinker, who was MTM Productions, did the Mary Tyler Moore Show,
Okay.
and did St. Elsewhere. He was a guy that said, no, you have to let the show find an audience. So they had Hill Street Blues and they had St. Elsewhere that tanked at first. He said, no, I have a feeling. And he let it grow. And the next thing you know, it's a TV phenomenon.
Right.
There's nobody now that would take a chance on a show for 2 years.
Right.
Now, 2 episodes and it's down in the ratings, you're out
Exactly.
of there.
I think I will say, because I've met enough great people, and I'm sure you have too, where there are people that have power that can see something and believe in it and give it its due. I just think you really got to fight now and the internet has really helped us find our audiences in a way where that's where the play is now. That's where the wiggle room is.
Yeah. I think you can carve out a personality for yourself, totally owning your own product.
Right.
Like your stuff on the internet. Do you post clips of your interview? Because you're a master interviewer. And I think you would benefit in that job the same way I did with stand-up, and that is one makes you good at the other.
Right.
People say, "Well, do you get nervous when you go on TV?" I said, "What? If this is, I'm doing the 5-day forecast.
Yeah.
It's so much easier than playing to drunks at 1 o'clock in the morning at the Comedy Store. It gives you chops.
Totally.
And so, same with you. You're good on your feet without a script, and probably part of that it comes from stand-up and doing crowd work and all that stuff.
It's the adrenals too. Like I started with hosting and interviewing, but now like with stand up and that physical, like, oh man, am I gonna, like, you still get a little bit of fear around stand up sometimes where
I get a pump out of it before I go on stage. I don't get nervous.
Yeah.
I get a combination of can't wait to get out there and God, I hope the new stuff works.
Exactly.
So it's somewhere in between.
But that feeling is so much more heightened than stepping onto a set and doing an interview.
Oh, no.
So the level of like my fear and anxiety around this job versus that one, it's like stand-up's way harder because they're strangers.
Yeah.
And you got to get
You're
them
being rejected in person. It's
right away. Yeah, you got how long? I ask comedians this a lot. How long do you have before you need an audience to like you? How long do you think it is? When you get up there, like say you're...
Well, Seinfeld said it's 5 minutes. Even if you're really famous, they give you a 5-minute bob.
5 with famous.
Yeah, right. But if you don't bring them in 5 minutes with all the material, even if you are famous, then they get bored and they're out of there.
Yeah, I would argue it's even less, I think, if you're up there.
Well, there are barometers in your act. Yeah. You have 2 or 3 that are like go-to, always work bits. If you slide one of those faves out there and the audience it's crickets, it's going to be a long night.
I've been studying myself too because it's so much about what you tell people who you are up front. Like I sometimes talk about being a dad or a father and from the East Coast. And one show I skipped all this open stuff and I realized that like I just wasn't as endearing to them.
They didn't know who you were.
Because they were
That's
like,
a very good point.
And it made me think, wow, I better tell these people every time who I am.
Tom
quickly.
Dreesen told me a great vaudeville adage. He said, when you go out, do 2 on you and then do the rest of your show.
Yeah. Tom was here. I love Tom.
He's just one of the nicest guys in this business without question.
I'm sure you guys were both at the store together as well back
then.
Yeah.
And the improv. And I just like to, when you're with him, you have to be prepared not to talk and just let him talk. And he'll tell the greatest stories about working with Sinatra.
Yeah. He told me one right here on this couch. When you're going through this career and you get out here, I want to go back to the 80s for a second because what was before someone plucked you to do Weather, which is so unbelievable that happened. What was the dream? Was it Tonight Show stand-up sitcom?
I wanted to be on TV.
Okay.
Carson was a hero of mine.
Yeah.
And then before Carson, Bob Hope was a hero of mine. And I think what it was the power that humor gave you. I just thought it was so cool that Carson could sit at the desk and with an offhanded comment convulse the audience. And I just thought that's power. That's such a warm personality. But I'll tell you the truth of what made me want to get into comedy in the first place was when I was in 11th grade, my uncle gave me tickets to see George Carlin. you're from the East Coast. They have these things along the East Coast in the summer called music fairs.
Yeah.
And this was the Valley Forge Music Fair, which was outside Philadelphia, my hometown, which is like a giant Cirque du Soleil tent. And they're quite beautiful. It seats 3,000 people. It's a rotating stage. So he gave me tickets to see George Carlin.
Wow.
Now, I had seen comics on The Tonight Show and Ed Sullivan and Merv Griffin. So I saw him in the 5-minute chunks for talk shows, but I never saw one do what you do, which is to do an hour and a half and make it look effortless and connect with a live audience. So I went to the show, and I'm not even exaggerating to say it was a religious experience. I mean, he was a master with wordplay and such a great storyteller. And it looked like he had never said these words before.
Yeah.
And he was so good that it changed my life.
Yeah.
And I never thought I could do it professionally, but I certainly wanted to try.
Yeah.
Because it was, I thought, that's a special person. I couldn't believe he did it. And it
Yeah.
was so good.
The power thing is something I don't always think about, but when you see someone absolutely kill and you see what the command, and if it's you, the command you have, there's nothing else like it
You
in
own
the
them.
world.
Yeah, yeah.
It's amazing.
It's the dichotomy is it's better than sex when it's working, but when it doesn't work, it is the loneliest feeling of self-loathing you'll ever have.
Oh my gosh.
And the bad nights last longer than the good nights.
100%. I've had so many times in LA where I've been at clubs and big headliners show up late and they go like, I just have to. They're famous. They go, I had a tough night earlier. Get me up. I need to rectify.
I know.
This mental.
I need another
feeling.
hit.
What's like do you have a highlight? Is your highlight moment at the store getting like the producer seeing you and offering you a job, or is there a night you can remember where, you know, a memory sticks out from working there so regularly? Like, how'd you get passed? You got passed at the store.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
that
she
must have
saw
been-
me a few times, and it took me 3 times to pass with Mitzi. And that's a conquest in itself.
Yeah.
Mitzi Shore was the owner of the store, and she was the judge and jury of the thing, and you had to get past her. And she had a good instinct about comics. She was married to Pauly Shore, and Sammy Shore, who opened for Elvis Presley for like 18 years. And so she had a sense of what good comedy was, and if somebody had the raw talent, and she picked a few people out. So you wanted to pass her, and then and when you passed, that means you became a paid regular, and you would call in Monday and give her your avails, and you would do 2 or 3 spots a week if you would. So yes, that was the big thing.
Also, like, there's something about comics that I really look up to in you and people I've met where you have to have a belief where you can't give up.
No.
Like bombing or auditioning and not getting passed. We have to have this like blind faith in being funny or you're not going to get there.
You know, I've had this discussion with actors. What's the worst kind of rejection? When you go out for a part and you audition and you don't get it, thank you, and you're too old for the part. That's a bad rejection. And if you do that a couple times a week, but the rejection in front of an audience, it's not. They're rejecting not only your jokes, they're rejecting you as a human being. They are discarding you from the planet.
Oh.
It's really hard. So you have to get used to that. But I quoted Shandling before. Shandling was great. He said after the Larry Sanders Show, and he was going out doing gigs at the Comedy and Magic Club in the store, and he'd read his new jokes. Do you like this? It was just like a young starting comedian.
Yeah.
I said, why do you still do this? He said, it takes too long to get good at this job. I'm not quitting, which is so true.
That's so
and he
great.
said it honestly takes about 20 years to become a good comedian.
Wow.
So what makes you a good comedian is finding your viewpoint, finding out the truth of who you are, and then turning that into humor, and people will like you. Well, I think the comics that have a difficult time are ones that are quite obviously copying somebody else's
Right.
riffs
Right.
or their cadence or their timing. When you find out who you are and you're speaking from your heart, people have a sense of that.
Yeah.
And then you're off to the races. And it's easier to write when you have a viewpoint.
Right. It's the authenticity and the confidence to just be yourself. I mean, I think
That's where the confidence, to answer your question, that's where the confidence comes from.
confidence, yeah. I mean, as people, it takes that long maybe to like, as you get older, to just feel more sure of like, this is who I am. Like you stop
Yes.
apologizing for things that are
No,
you.
that's exactly. Everybody feels the same way, but it's a little sharper on stage.
It's worse because we have to. We're effed if we don't
Right.
sharpen that knife.
Exactly.
So, you get the job. I am curious also, this rise to fame for you in LA. I mean, this is the showbiz capital of the world. And then
Let me tell you something. Between Santa Barbara and the Mexican border, I'm huge.
Well, I know, but I'm saying this must have been a fun wave for you. I'm using wave, of course, California, where you start to become this known guy on TV in town. And what was that like?
It was great. I mean, I never took the response of viewers lightly.
Okay.
Because what happens is the news is one of the only types of television where they break the fourth wall. That is, you look into the camera.
Yeah.
And when you look into the camera, you're setting up this artificial intimacy with people. And when you do that for 40 years, you're talking to people like, and you become part of their family.
Yeah.
And so then you'll get into a situation where you're in a grocery store and an old lady will walk up to you and say, I love you. I've been watching you for 30 years. I named my cockatiel after you, Fritz. And then she'll say, but if you'll permit me one criticism, I said, please, that's what I'm here for. She'll say, never wear that tie you wore last Thursday because it's unflattering to your face. And I thought, you know what? Duly noted.
Yeah.
But I mean, after you make that connection with them, this false intimacy, they feel they have some proprietary interest in feeling like, wait, no, I'm inviting you into my home every day.
Right.
You owe me this. And it's true. So there's that, which is a gift. It's an honor for that to happen.
That's so cool.
From a comedy standpoint, the beautiful thing about being on TV, it was easy to get booked.
That's cool.
Everywhere. For not only club gigs, but, luncheon and dinner speaking engagements and all the places you do time.
Yeah, I mean, especially at that time for TV, it's a great vehicle to just get your name out there and get, go show headline and do your thing.
I feel like that was the peak of the exposure of television news.
Right.
Because young people don't watch television anymore.
Yeah.
And now you have streaming and all these I think streaming television is going to kill network television.
Totally, yeah.
Because prime time is just not what it used to be.
Yeah, unless like TV news and lifestyle shows like I do, like adapt and stream live or find the audience there. It's these old business and new business still kind of like coming together.
Yeah.
If they can crack, because even me, like Carson, late night's my dream still, but no one's done late night for stream. Like no one's doing talk for streaming. There still is like a disconnect.
That's really interesting. Now,
that I believe can work.
About a month ago, what's his name? What the heck's his name? I can't think of it. But anyway,
tell me the category. Let's play
John
Mulaney.
John Mulaney.
Yes.
Did that
I saw
thing,
that. Exactly.
And I think what they were doing was taking the temperature of the audience.
Exactly.
And I thought he did a fantastic job.
I only saw some of it, but yeah, great format,
it
live,
was
variety.
really good, and maybe that I never heard this from anybody, but it seemed to me like they were testing the format to do a daily live thing, like that. So it might happen.
And live, like comedy events. They're doing stand up live on Netflix now, and as someone on live TV, and I do live TV as well. That I don't think is going to die. I just think we're going to take audiences to new places, and TV has to catch up and say, yes, now you're here. Yeah. If it's Peacock, if it's Netflix, we're here, and this thing's exciting, and it's live.
Yeah.
That's how they'll survive, because people still tune in.
Price. And then they'll tape it, and then you can stream it later if you want to.
I've changed my dream. I want to share with you, because you're such a pro. I want to do live variety and talk and stand-up and just film it and then have it live on after. Because that's the most fun. It's everything.
Why don't you pitch that idea to someplace like Netflix? It's a great idea. Because
Stand-up.
Mulaney did it was just talk and chatter, and nobody did any stand-up, and he messed with the audience, and the Will Ferrell thing was great.
Yeah.
That's a great idea, because I think people ask me, what's going to happen to local TV like Channel 4, 207? I think the live events, like breaking news events, fires, and all those things, those are the only thing that make those a viable medium anymore. Yeah. So I think maybe doing something live like that will bump up people's interest in it.
It's interesting. I mean, there's still the utility of live that I love too. If God forbid we all lost power, the radio is going to find a way to, we still need these mediums. Mm-hmm. It's just the audiences our attention span is just so different.
I think you should pitch that show. It's a great idea.
One day, I think I want to develop it live. I want to take it to clubs and develop it and get it really fine-tuned with a live audience.
That's a great idea. And bring people in and say, look at this.
And then it's like a hybrid of late night meets kind of old school variety on stage. Yeah. But I've fallen in love with live audiences. So, because my question also for you, doing weather for so long, is you're not getting the fix. And I know this, I crack a joke in the studio and there's a publicist who's looking at her phone now. You don't get what you get from stand-up
No.
in interviews or on TV.
No. And here's when it got bad. When they went to robotic cameras.
Oh, I have those.
Because then there's nobody
You're
in the
playing
studio.
robots.
You have anchor people. You have self-preoccupied anchor people over here doing their hair and lips during your segment. They're not listening to your jokes. There are no cameramen. There's no live stage manager. You're playing to silence.
You know what you just reminded me of? The lost art of unmiked crew laughter.
Yeah.
That is a lost art.
Yeah. It's like in the talk show, the band laughing. And
Yes,
you
it's
got
like the... it's okay.
I know. And then you get, woo, there's a home run right
And
there.
us, we get like, we got the
No,
if you make the
it was
crew laugh.
awful. When they went to robotic cameras, I hated it because I'm thinking, was that
know.
funny? Is that even being broadcast?
Well, I guess viewers would tell you stuff that would work and stuff. But yeah, local outsourced, because at both studios now that I work for NBC, the studios, it's all robotic. And during the pandemic, in New York, they let go of the stage manager. We had one stage manager who was there forever who left in the pandemic.
Yeah.
And it was like, no one's here.
Yeah, if you could make these grizzled old camera guys laugh, you had really done something.
Exactly. Well, I was curious about your fix because you get this job and then you like the balance. And I know this as a father, it's like I want to do my work and get paid for TV, but then I want to get to the clubs and work on my act. So what was that balance like for you once you got this job and it was full time?
Well,
were you up all the time?
I did the 5, 6, and 11 o'clock news, which made my day a split shift. I will go in, and when the weather forecaster is in duty, he prepares his whole presentation. There's nobody else helping him.
Yeah.
In New York, they had meteorologists and all that were doing your math. But out here, we had to build our own thing. So I would go in at noon, and I would build my maps and prepare my story and do the 5 and 6. Then I would get off at 6:30. I'd be back at 9 or 9:30 if the weather was stable. And so I'd go to the Improv or the Comedy Dorms, do a set 2 or 3 nights a week.
Great.
I mean, that was the only way I could continue. And then on
Wow.
weekends, I could do whatever I want.
Wow. So you had the little window with the job.
Yeah,
which is
absolutely.
good.
And unless there was flooding or something, but
Yeah.
that was very rare.
But you always, because you told me this when we met last time, we did a great segment for local
It's
TV
fantastic.
together.
Got a lot of
here.
good response from that.
I'm so glad. But you always kept stand up. You didn't really ever leave. You
Never
always
gave
did
it up,
right?
no.
That's amazing.
No. And as I say, I built a reasonable amount of credibility from Santa Barbara to the Mexican border. I can't get booked in Utah. I can't get booked east of the Rockies for anybody. But I can, I can stay around here and do as much
It's
work as I
amazing.
want.
That must be fun though to be able to be, you have your audience, you have your fans. It must feel good now, especially with this residency you've been doing, where you get to continue to do your favorite part of it.
My fans and I are growing old together. That's why the name of my residency is Unassisted Living.
Tell me about how that's going. I saw you for that at the El Portal, right?
Yeah, it's going great. Next month, August, we will have been there a year with sold out shows.
Wow.
They've asked us to continue into 2025. No hard ending, just keep going. And we're having a blast.
Wow.
I'm in the smaller space. You saw that, what's called the Marilyn Monroe Forum,
Yep.
which is an equity waiver theater. It's like 100 seats, not the big stage, which has 365. But it's just the right amount of people for me. And it's a semicircle. It's very intimate. And you can walk right up and look into the eyes of your audience. And we have cocktail tables in the front. It's like a very intimate club. And I really love it.
That's so cool. How do you stay sharp doing a monthly show now at this point in your stand-up career? Are you getting up to do club spots?
I'm doing other gigs. Believe it or not, ever since the pandemic, I've been getting lots of bookings in Orange County.
That's great.
I think Orange County, because they're a slightly more red county.
Yeah, I love it down there.
They opened early. They had live audiences for stuff early. I was getting some great gigs down there.
Yeah, and great comedy audiences there.
Great comedy audience
Great.
because you're away from LA and it's still special to come out and see a live performance.
What I struggle with now with comedy, and I'm not
Do
complaining.
you do the road at all?
I do Orange County a lot. I love
good.
Orange County.
Yeah,
I just did
good.
Laguna a couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, they're packed and they're good people and they're fun.
Yes.
And they're nothing. And I'm a very family friendly stand up, but like nothing seems like anyone's gonna get mad at you.
No.
Or,
No.
And even if you interact, it's more like a comedy show.
And it's really good it's like trying your act on the road.
Yeah.
And you never really know how good you are until you can do middle of the country, regular human beings. And you get a lot of that in Orange County.
I would actually argue now LA is kind of confusing with stand up because you got everyone in the crowd who
is in show business.
Is in show, exactly, or on their phones or famous on the internet. And so you have a lot of people who you're kind of performing to that crowd, and it's not regular people. Like my dream is to go on the road and really see how good I am.
Oh, you will.
And I think I would do well.
You'll go out with somebody who'll ask you to
That's
open
what I
for
want to
them.
do eventually to really get better.
Yeah.
But I think home base here is the best because it was like this in the 80s for you. It's like this now. I show up to a club, Kevin Hart's on stage working out. It's still like that here.
Yeah.
Only here.
Yeah.
It's not even like that. New York is great, but in LA, you can be a peer with legends and you really can learn and be a sponge.
That was the phenomenon I got to see at the Comedy Store with Richard Pryor when he was preparing for Live on the Sunset Strip. And you get to see those and see how they work. And there's a magic about that, no question about it. But the other thing is the LA audiences are very judgmental.
Yeah.
And because a lot of them are in show business. And you know what? Here's a phenomenon that started 20 years ago, but I was able to beat it, and I'm so glad it was bringer rooms. We'll give you a spot if you can bring 10 of your friends. Well, your friends can only see you so many times until they won't answer your phone calls.
Right.
I just think that's raw. You generate the audience. I'll perform for them. I'm not going to bring everybody in my neighborhood to the show every time. You can't.
And they don't pay. So we were talking about before, it still happens. Well, they'll make all the money, and you bring all the audience. So they're basically making money off your friends.
No.
So once you get wise to that, when I first came out here, though, I was like, I need stage time. But then I realized, oh, wait a second, like, I'm doing all this work.
And if you don't know anybody out here, who are you going to bring?
Yeah.
There's a guy next door to me in my apartment. I'm bringing him and his wife.
The mailman's here. I'm paying the I'm losing money. I'm paying the mailman tonight to just be at the show. That's what I'm doing. That's really cool, though, that you've stuck with stand-up as long as you have, because it's got to form and tell your comedy now with this show. Because it's so second nature. I mean, decades long.
Plus, I don't know. And this might be me being old and sentimental, but I think the comics now have an even greater responsibility because we're such a divided culture.
Yeah.
And I don't do any politics in my act. I think people just want to be taken out of their heads for an hour and a half. Just here's what you and I have in common. I'll make jokes about it. You have the same feelings I do. I've just put a punchline at the end. And you make them feel better. And I just think what we do is so necessary right now. And I feel good about that.
Yeah. There's a purpose to comedy that will always exist, that it's scary to think that it will be policed or not allowed, because we need it. We need to laugh. It's
always the speak truth to power thing. But listen, I'm not trying to be Lenny Bruce. I'm not trying to test the First Amendment.
Yeah.
I just want people to feel good, have this community experience of laughter, and then go home and smile. That's all. I'm not looking to change anything.
Right. Well, that's what you're so good at, though. It's lightening. I mean, life can be hard. We're supposed to lighten people's load sometimes.
I think that's a big responsibility right now.
Totally. I do need to ask you about Johnny Carson, because it's on my mind.
Okay.
Somebody who I've been in that studio in Burbank Studios, and you mentioned Bob Hope before.
It's weighty, isn't it?
Well, yeah, and it was Bob Hope's. Whoa, did you see that flicker?
Yeah.
That was weird. That's never happened.
With all the heat, there are probably going to be power glitches all over the place.
No, but we said Bob Hope and Johnny Carson.
That's funny.
It was like, we're here.
Be careful what you say. Yeah.
We're only like 10 minutes from this studio right now. Maybe they're like listening. I don't know. But that is such hollow ground. It was Bob Hope's before, and then Johnny took the Tonight Show there. I've stood on that star. I've been in that studio after it was all gone.
Yeah. I did both shows. I performed on the Bob Hope show.
Whoa.
He used to do his Christmas specials.
Right.
And he would have a theme. So one Christmas, he did HNN, the Hope News Network, and I was the weatherman.
Oh, wow.
And this is when I learned that even though he was 100 years old, he still was funny and still knew what was funny. Because I was doing this weather segment, and they built me this weather map that had each of the states stuck to a Velcro thing. And I had a pointer, and I was supposed to point and do the weather, a little 30-second bit. And we were going through the rehearsal, and I hit California with the pointer, and California fell off the Velcro background. And I keep talking, and Hope comes running out of his dressing room. He's watching this taping. He said, "Stop. I want you to do that same joke, do the same thing, But after you hit the thing, and we'll cut away and we'll make it look like it's all one take. When you hit the thing and California falls off, I want you to look into the camera and say, well, I guess Nostradamus was right. And because this was at a time when Nostradamus figured there's going to be a big earthquake in California, I said, damn, he's good.
Wow.
And he was good. And I had a date with, what the hell's her name? Morgan Fairchild. And all these people were on the show. And my father was not a fan of Johnny Carson. He just didn't. He thought he was too sarcastic. My father's a real middle American. That's smart ass, you know.
Right.
But when I did the Bob Hope show, then I had arrived in show business.
Wow.
Because he was the World War II guy, you know.
Oh yeah, he's that generation too.
Yeah,
The boomers,
exactly.
the war guy.
Exactly.
That's incredible. I didn't realize you also did with Bob Hope.
Yeah.
Two legends though.
Yeah.
But I am curious.
I did the Merv Griffin show.
Oh, wow.
On his last 2 weeks, one of his last 2 weeks.
Cool.
And he had hired Pat Sajak from Doing the Weather to do Wheel of Fortune. You know, he owned that show.
That's right.
So I did my set, and I went back to the desk during the Merv Griffin show, and I knelt down in front of him. I said, please, isn't there a game show for me? And the audience went nuts.
That's hilarious.
Yeah.
What was it like? And I've talked to other comics like this, Tom Dreesen, a couple of the people who've done Carson.
Dreesen has close to a record for like 65 performances or something.
Yeah, and Letterman too. He's done a lot of late night Dreesen.
Yeah.
But I'm curious for somebody thinking of your journey. You know, you get this weatherman job. You still do stand up all the time. The mecca of coming out here. First of all, getting passes is a big step, but Carson is the dream.
Yeah, I'm not Jewish, but I said that's your comedy bar mitzvah.
Right.
When you do the Carson show.
I just am curious from a comedian standpoint and a fear standpoint too. Like, did you feel prepared? Were you ready? What was the experience like getting there? Did you remember it?
Okay. Well, they had, and I'm sure, Dreesen was on the Tonight Show before Jim McCauley. Jim McCauley was the talent coordinator on the Tonight Show that handled the comics. Before him, it was Craig Tennis. And I think Dreesen may have gotten on the show when Craig Tennis was the talent coordinator. So McCauley saw that the idea that I was a weatherman doing comedy and my office was right upstairs over the Tonight Show, he thought, that's funny. So we built the set around that. And I worked with him for 2 years to hone this 6-minute, what they call your hip six. You know, you go in there. And he, God bless him, he made me an interesting item that Johnny would appreciate. So if you remember the old Tonight Show, the timing of it was 11:30, and he'd do his monologue. Then we'd come back and do a desk piece till about 10 minutes of 12. Then he would have the headliner, who would go from like 10 of 12 to 10 after 12. And then, time permitting, there would be a comic in that middle segment, and then you'd have the music act or some novelty. So the first time I got on, Heather Locklear was the headliner.
Wow.
And Heather apparently had some recent enhancements physically. And Johnny was enamored with her. And he just wouldn't stop flirting with her and went long. So Fred DeCordova comes backstage and said, you're not going to make it on, bud. We're going to have to bump you. I'll get you back in a couple of weeks.
Wow.
And you call everyone you've ever met, even people you hated, and people that hated you, and people who bullied you in high school. I'm going to be on the Tonight Show. Damn it. You
Take
better
that.
work.
Yeah.
So I got bumped. I said, oh, God. And then I called him the next morning, called everybody back.
Oh, my God.
Yeah. I go on the second time, and I can't remember the guy's name. He was a talk show host, and he was an actor. But he was a great storyteller, but didn't have the ability to end his stories in a reasonable amount of time. And so he went long, and I got bumped again. And Freddie came back and said, I'm sorry. So I got bumped twice. And that time I was so humiliated, I didn't even call my family and say, I'm not going to be on, don't bother. I'll show you a tape later. And so I finally got on the third time, and it was a gift because by that time I just wanted to get it over with. My nerves were all gone.
Yeah.
And here's the great third act of that story. The headliner, when I finally made it on, was Linda Ronstadt.
Cool.
And Linda Ronstadt knew who I was because she used to date Jim Carrey, and she would come to the Comedy Store and watch him all the time.
Cool.
So she knew who I was. I'd never spoken to her, but she knew who I was and knew I did the weather in L.A.
Right.
So I'm very nervous, and I like to pace backstage, and I'm going over my, how you do before a show. And she's the headliner, and she's backstage having a drink and watching me, and she said, you're Fritz Coleman, right? And I said, yes. She said, you're on the show tonight. And I said, yes. She said, you seem like you're really nervous. I said, well, it's just that comic thing. And so she said, come here. She wrapped her arms around me and gave me a hug that lasted like 60 seconds and didn't say anything.
Whoa.
But it was like hypnosis. It drained all the tension out of my body.
Oh my gosh.
It made me feel so comfortable. She was so lovely.
Wow.
And I never forgot her for that. It was a very maternal thing for her to do. And it was really lovely and just made me feel so good. And she is a special person.
And then you went out and did your thing.
Then I went out and just relaxed, and it was a good set, and it was
Wow.
okay. I didn't get called over to the desk,
Right.
but I didn't bomb.
Right.
And it was much less stress-induced than if I had gone on the first time.
Yeah. So much of this business that I tell myself, like when you're finally there and you have to step up and do a good job, if we could just remove the fear and anxiety, and if you find a way to be confident and comfortable, you're going to do
You
great.
just have to be prepared for it, and that takes
Prepared.
most of the stress away.
Yeah.
And then if you've convinced yourself that you deserve it,
Yeah.
say, you know what, I've been building. Let's go. And then, but you do get nervous. I'm a very nervous person just generally. So.
Yeah. I've talked to a lot of comics. If you had no nerves, you may not perform the same way. You can't be
No.
like super. Maybe, but you have to have a little bit of that to maybe perform.
Did you see the documentary called Mr. Warmth about Don Rickles
Yes.
on HBO?
Yes, I love Don. He's one of my favorites ever.
And you know what? The gift of his brilliance is no one has ever copied him.
No.
He's never copied. No, you can't copy Rickles. So you saw him get in the preliminary to him performing
Yeah.
was him. And he's got a guy helping him get dressed backstage. He's got to
Yeah.
tie his tie, and he's helping him walk down the hall, and he's bent over. And I'm thinking, how's this guy going to do an hour? And he gets up and he helps him up the stairs, and he's ready to go on stage. Then they play that that Toreador song,
Yeah.
and he goes out on stage, and it's like somebody gave him crack. He has suddenly full of energy, and he's this other personality takes over, and he's like a man a half his age.
Right.
And I thought that's what happens when you've been doing it so long that you just come into yourself the minute the lights
Right.
go on.
It's comfortability too, like we talked about earlier with the nervousness and going up against strangers. When that is the norm, you do it as long as someone like you.
Yeah.
It's like tying your shoes. You're used to the environment.
Yeah. And there's a thing about having your fans come to see you.
Yeah, that's nice too, I bet.
And when you're not having to prove yourself to a room full of strangers.
Yeah.
Who's this guy? And make me laugh. When people are there to see you, there's a certain excitement level, and then you're off.
Yeah,
and
you
running.
have them. They're already fans of yours, and you kind of play with that energy.
Yep.
Don's one of my biggest inspirations because he had such a big heart. I feel like what I loved about the ribbing that went with his comedy, but he always ended. He was always a class act.
No, there was
He
a soul under there. It was not malicious
always,
at all. Yeah.
Always.
And that made him one of the greatest talk show guests. When he and Carson were together, forget about it.
Tell me about material now, because unassisted living, you're getting older. Your audience maybe is getting older with you. Some
Yeah.
people come to
Yeah.
see you,
Yeah.
grew up watching you,
Yeah.
and are fans of yours. Do you look at this experience of aging through the comedy lens, and that's where the show came from?
Yes.
You have to joke about
Yes.
it?
I after I had done the Tonight Shows and everything, I came up with this format that seemed to work for me. I came up with, and I made up this title, a single topic monologue, where I do a show about one topic. The first one I did was about being a father. I had just been through a divorce. I had 2 sons, and I wrote it as a one-man show. It wasn't all comedy. There was pathos and everything in it.
Mm-hmm.
And I was doing it at a small house up in North Hollywood, the Actors Forum. It was 60 seats. And it was very touching. It was about, alcoholism and being a father and explaining. And my kids were 8 and 7 at the time. So the conceit was I come out on stage and I set up a home video camera in front of me. And I narrate that I'm in my den at home.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to tell my children everything about my life, good, bad, all the ugliness. And I'm going to put this in a safe deposit box. And when they're over 18, they can see this tape.
Wow.
And what made me do it was, and this is true, I'd been to my father's funeral. And it was such a bittersweet experience because there were people talking about my father in the eulogies about stuff I never knew about.
Right.
I mean, the good and the bad about my dad. And I thought, wow, I didn't even know my father. And it made me, and I just swore to myself at that moment that I would never, ever allow my children to not know everything about me, good and bad. So I did this, and it turned out to be a one-person show. So as I'm doing it, a representative from public television, KCET, was in the audience one night, and they purchased the show
Oh my gosh.
and broadcast it on public television every Father's Day for 7 years.
Wow.
Because there was a touching aspect of healing,
Sure.
and there's nothing better than forgiveness, kind of a thing. And so I built that format. So after I did that show, that was called It's Me, Dad. Then the next one I did was a show about divorce. And then the next one was about the news called Tonight at 11. Then there was another one about, my first one about aging called Defying Gravity, which was me just saying, oh my God, I'm old. This one, unassisted living, is I'm old. There's nothing I can do about it. Here's what I'm saying now.
Wow.
So that's why I do these shows. So it's just, somebody called it a baby boomer support group. It's just me talking to people of a certain age, the common experiences of getting old. I have to be sensitive about the fact that since I have an older audience, I can't be too blue.
Right.
I can't be too crude.
Right.
Because it makes them uncomfortable.
Right.
And I have found that, I have this show running on Tubi now. It's been running on
That's
for a while,
great.
Unassisted Living.
Yeah.
And what helped us to sell it to Tubi was there are millions of stand-up acts on streaming and Netflix and Prime, but very few to this older demographic.
Right.
They're all younger, and they're racy, and they're outrageous, and you got Dave Chappelle, and they all love that. But some of my audience and older, it just makes them wince a little bit. So I try to pay attention to their codes.
That's really cool and interesting because
You have to know your audience a little bit.
You have to know
I
your
just know what
audience.
they'll stand to.
But also that lane is really interesting because your audience respects good material and respects.
Yeah.
I mean, most comedy in general from that era and beyond, clean, funny, good material. I mean,
Yeah, and here's what Tubi said. They said not only that, but baby boomers and older, people 55 plus, are the people that have, and they're trying to appeal to advertisers, they're the people that have money to spend.
Right.
The younger generation doesn't have it.
Right.
The old people save their money.
right? They're like,
And
hey.
so it appeals to a certain economic group
Yeah.
as well. So it's pretty cool.
You don't have to give away much of the show, but what is the funniest thing to you? You can answer quickly about this decade of life right now, like of aging that you talk about. What's the funniest thing to you?
You got to get it out of your head because I don't feel as old as I am. I feel young. And if you keep yourself in reasonably good, so don't trick yourself into looking at your chronological age and say, wow, I'm in my mid-70s,
Yeah.
time to sit down.
Yeah.
No, you just go where your energy takes you. And what makes me feel younger, I have an 11 and a 9-year-old grandchild, and it's a gift.
You're running around.
It's fun, yeah.
Wow. Aren't we sold in America though, like to be lazy and consume? Like it's a battle to not be active as you get older. Like we're kind of sold like sit in the lazy boy and
Yeah.
eat and do
Yeah.
nothing as you
Yeah.
get older. Like that's what people sell us.
No, and go live in the retirement community. I have
Yeah.
bits about all that. I have bits about how the pandemic made me lazy, and I don't want to do anything where I have to undo the seatbelt on my recliner. I don't want to cook dinner. I don't want to go out for dinner.
Yeah.
Let's just order our favorite sushi from DoorDash.
Yeah.
It'll only cost $1,000, but I don't have to leave the house.
Yeah, it's amazing.
So,
Convenience.
yeah.
Reminds me of the line like the Sopranos when he moves his mom into a community. He's trying to make it nice, and they go like, "It's assisted living." He goes, "It's a retirement community. It's a retirement."
No, exactly.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. I think what I love so much about you and what I respect is you've taken this amazing life in show business, but you've constantly done the work to make entertaining pieces of art with
I
these.
like it. I have to be active. I'm very nervous. I have to be active.
Me too. You figure that out in a relationship too. Like I know now, if I'm not busy, I'm going to be a miserable husband.
No, precisely.
So that's also maybe it for you. As you scratch this itch, you come out to LA, you do all this stand-up stuff, you get this job. You've always made shows and stand-up though. That must.
I was
be
worried about
amazing.
retirement. I thought,
Yeah.
ooh, is this going to suck the life out of me? No, I can be active now, but in things I love to do. So I write every day for a couple hours.
Wow.
I just, I work. I'm on the board of 3 nonprofits
Wow.
in LA, and I'm busy, but all things I love, the things that feed my soul.
That's the dream, though. As you get older, to do things that feed your
Yes,
soul and not any
exactly.
other crap.
Exactly.
That's amazing.
Exactly.
You're doing it how I want to do it. You're doing it the right way.
I'm going to hand it all off to you when I'm done.
Please, I'll do it.
You're going to do fine. You have a great personality.
Oh, thank you.
You're so. We talked about this before we went on. Media is very sterile now.
Yeah.
I mean the news business.
Yeah.
Because I think it's all about branding. They just when you tune in, you have to see the colors and the framing and the sets all have to look like NBC.
Right.
They don't care about the
Right.
people.
Right.
It's the branding.
Yeah.
And so when you come on, when you do California Live,
Yeah.
you just pop because you have more personality than most of the people
thank
you're
you,
working
man.
with.
Well,
No
I'm
offense to them, but
I'm going to send this to them so they keep me on
Please.
the show. I appreciate you saying
I'll make a
that.
call.
And I'm grateful. What I'll say about my work is I'm grateful it's connecting me with people like you. We met
Oh.
through the TV job, but I get to really learn, meet, and what a gift to just connect with people I admire and talk to them more and become friends with them. You know?
I appreciate that. You have talent. I even told the California Live producer, I said, special guy.
Oh,
and
thank you.
just need to, I think you should pitch that idea for
Thank
the
you.
live streaming.
You're so
variety
sweet.
show.
I don't even know how to take compliments on the show. I'm like, stop it. I don't know what to say over here.
No.
But
It's
I
all good.
appreciate that. Coming from you means a lot.
I'm old. I know a lot.
And you also know this business, and I love the history of show business. And you represent a certain time. We're talking about 80s, 90s. I
So
respect
lucky.
everything that happened before.
Yeah.
I love it. I love the way this all happened.
Yeah.
I'm hoping there's more people out there that take chances, like people who took chances on you. That's such a
Yeah.
cool theme to
Yeah.
think about.
Yeah.
Before you go, because I can have you compliment me for another hour, where can everybody follow you and make sure people come see the show at the El Portal?
Okay,
When's
the
next
real
show?
Fritz Coleman on Instagram
Right.
and on Facebook. You can come to we have a show this Sunday, but it's sold out.
Okay.
But August is our 1-year anniversary, so come to that show.
That's great.
Just go to elportaltheater.com. You'll see a big banner in there that has my show in it. It's at 3 o'clock on a Sunday afternoon because my
nice.
demographic, I like to have them home by dark. And so come and see it.
Oh my gosh, what a dream at that time! Too.
Right.
Like you get that's the best gig ever.
Yeah,
You know,
really.
you're
3
sleeping,
o'clock, yeah.
You're back. You're watching Netflix. You're going to bed by the time you're done with your show.
Exactly.
That's amazing. Well, it's such an honor to chat with you. Thanks for coming on.
I'm so
man.
happy to talk to you. We could have talked for 3 hours.
I could have you for 3 hours if you. I know you got to go in a little bit, but I want more stories. I'll have you come back.
I hope so.
Make sure you go see him at the El Portal Theater, guys. And thank you for being here. I really appreciate it. We're back every week. We'll see you next week. Goodbye, everybody. Now I'm looking at you. This is intimate. We have a relationship. Thanks for watching, guys. This episode was brought to you by Barefoot Dreams. You know, after we had the fun we just had with my guest, Shu actually came back in here to enjoy the comfort of Barefoot Dreams. Shu, how you feeling over there with the pillow?
Yep, I like this one.
Don't critique them. They're paying for this. Just say it's good.
They're all very good.
That's right. And don't forget, guys, because they're part of this season, you put the promo code POPUP15 at barefootdreams.com. You can get 15% off your first purchase. And maybe you could be like Shu and you could just have a more comfortable life. Though Shu, I told him he can get something for free from them, and I've never given him a blanket.
Yeah, because nothing in life actually comes free, does it?
Barefootdreams.com. Thanks, guys.